How is one supposed to be sick? Or how do you want somebody to seem sick when they're sick? Um, you know, there's kind of a double standard when it comes to that, because if you don't act sick or you try and rise above being sick and you're all like boppy and happy as you're talking about or sharing about being sick, you are deemed some kind of faker. You're accused of trying to get attention by saying that you're sick when you don't seem sick. And then on the other end of it, if you seem like you're sick or you seem tired and downtrodden and even kind of depressive, then you're accused of being depressive and a whiner. So it's kind of like you can't win, because if you are like happy and boppy, like I have been accused of being an attention seeker because I'm rising above my being sick. I'm used to being sick. I'm used to very high levels of pain. Most people that you see making videos about chronic illness, they are used to being sick. So they don't seem sick. And, they have like a smile on their face. And, they're probably in a fairly high level of pain. They're achy. They're tired. They're maybe even a bit nauseated, malaised. And because they live like that day in and day out, a human being cannot always be reacting to being sick. If they're sick 24/7, it just wouldn't be healthy. You wouldn't you would be miserable. You'd be depressed. People have no choice but to rise above and detach from. I'm not going to say disassociate, because disassociating is extreme and not healthy. Sometimes we have to disassociate, though, from our pain, and we do it a lot. We do it a lot because we don't have a choice. We have to move forward sometimes, and we have to live, and the thing isn't going to go away. So my question for people that are not ill is, what do you want us to seem like? What do you want? You don't want us to be downtrodden and, sad and whiny and depressive, because it's too depressing for you and you can't handle it. But you question whether we're genuine or not if we're like too happy and positive. So it's really offensive in general, because people who are not chronically ill don't understand what it's like to be chronically ill. They're only going by how they would react if they were acutely ill. If someone's acutely ill and they're not used to it, they're gonna really feel it. It's gonna hit them, and they're gonna be miserable and whiny about it, and you know appear sick and seem sick and go and rest and whatever. We don't do that. Well, we do when we're in a severe flare up, but when we're walking around at our baseline, say a scale of 1 to 10 pain or illness, our baseline is 5 or 6, then we become accustomed to that. And people have all kinds of different reactions to being sick. It depends on their personality. The people that are very like outgoing and, I find they get misunderstood the most. People that are kind of that ambitious type A kind of personality, but they're sick. They are the ones that often do the, activism, self-advocacy, sharing vlogs and things like that. And people don't like it. People don't want to hear it. People are maybe even on some level jealous or threatened that of the person's strength, that they can actually, come on here and talk about their illness bravely and defiantly overcome um, being miserable because they're not feeling well. We, when we don't want something like an illness to hold us back or define us, I mean, I talk a lot about my illness because I won't even say my illness, this illness, because it's not mine. I don't want it. Um, but anyway, this illness that I have, when I talk about it because it's a poorly understood condition. And I and it's not actually that uncommon. It's not rare. It's just very underdiagnosed, and a lot of people are suffering, and it's I think it's really important to talk about the nature of it so that people might recognize it in either themselves or somebody that they know, so that we can, move forward with change so that change can happen, so that more people will know what it's like, and what to how to recognize it. And you know EDS does have features to it, even in the way people look and the way people are sick. People may be able to start recognizing that the more that people like myself talk about it and explain it. But do I do it because I want somebody to pity me? No, I don't like pity. Pity makes me feel uncomfortable. um, a bit of compassion once in a while, especially when I'm, having a really rough time. Like, compassion and understanding is totally different than pity. What really is offensive is that a lot of people who are not sick have the gall to accuse people who are sick and who are speaking about it of wanting pity. Just because society is automatically conditioned to pity somebody who's sick doesn't mean that the sick person wants pity. People who are sick, most of them don't want pity. I'll tell you something right now. The people who are actually faking it are the people that are usually seeking the pity. People who are genuinely dealing with a chronic illness very seldomly want pity. They want understanding and compassion. They want somebody to accept their limits. Sometimes they will talk about it a lot because they don't feel that they're being understood, and they're trying hard to like emphasize it because they want to be understood. That's all they want. And what ends up backfiring is that it makes them look like they're centered around their illness and they want people to pity them. That, however, is an ignorant sort of conclusion to be drawn there. Again, it's coming from a person who themselves does not experience the having a chronic illness and can't really relate with how it feels to live that way, and to just want people to understand what your limits are, to just understand what you have to deal with, not for the purpose of pity, but for the purpose of maybe making accommodations. It is really rough for people that are already dealing with sickness. But I'll tell you what is an unacceptable insult on top of having to deal with chronic pain and feeling like, to some degree, like crap all the time. What makes that worse and adds insult to injury is society and the way that people often treat illness, either with pity, total pity and patronization, or shame and disgust. Like, they don't want to look at it and they think the person's automatically faking, or that they're like somehow weak and feeble and an invalid. Society has really polarized attitudes about illness, about chronic illness, and they these attitudes need to change and become more objective and less polarized, and taking into account an individual personality and how they're dealing with the illness, of what kind of illness it is there access to care for that illness, what kind of barriers does the illness present, does it cause severe fatigue, does it cause a lot of pain, does it cause troubles with mobility, does it cause eating limits, does it cause the need to have to bathroom map everywhere, um, to wear certain types of clothes only, loose fitting or tight or flexible. So many things. It's just about being understood. Taking that person's situation and looking at it, and looking at it individually, instead of projecting cookie cutter attitudes to the sick person's reaction. So, think about this. How do you want us to be sick? How do you expect to see someone sick? Do you expect them to walk around being like, oh, gee, like most people who are sick chronically don't do that. They're so used to it. They're so used to not feeling well that it got old to do that, And I'm not saying to constantly disassociate. There's a certain degree of pain and fatigue that we get to where it's like we just have to go rest, or we could end up with a really serious flare up that could possibly be safety compromising. So, when somebody says that they're sick and they don't seem sick to you, they're probably just coping. And sometimes the person will say, "Oh, ow, I feel like crap," and they might have some feelings. Sometimes the person won't seem sick at all and seem like positive and boppy. That's all coping. Some of it is the person needing to have those feelings and talk about it once in a while when things get really bad. Needing to acknowledge it, just to take some time to grieve a bit. And then other times they're coping. They're just detaching. So when you don't understand the psychological processes that have to go on for somebody living with a chronic illness, don't jump to ignorant conclusions about who that person is or whether they're genuine or not. I'll tell you, you will know when someone's not genuine because unfortunately there are a few people that wreck it out there for many people. There are a few people that are faking illness for real. However, keep in mind that the incidence of people who actually fake illness, who actually have Munchausen behavior, histrionic behavior, it's not that common. It's actually quite uncommon. And you could usually tell. The problem is that society is afraid of this whole chronic illness thing. And because of that, they're taking the few incidences out there of histrionic behavior and even Munchausen behavior, and they're like victim blaming tons and tons and tons of people who are actually sick and are trying to talk about it and be activists and form a grassroots movement so that we can get better complex illness health care and understanding and accommodations and treatments and eventually leading back to at least partial employability and things like that. There are scores of people living with chronic illness now. It is very common, much, much more common than histrionic or Munchausen personality disorder stuff. So that many people are not histrionic or Munchausen. Let's just put it that way. Think again about what you think illness looks like. Illness doesn't have to be obvious. It's most often not obvious and, in fact, totally invisible. So society needs to stop jumping straight to skepticism as soon as somebody says that they're sick. And I hope that will change, because either there's a jump to skepticism or a jump to pity. I can't stand either of those reactions, and it's hard for people like me to live in today's age when those reactions are so common. But you really need to think that the dynamic of how somebody's going to act when they're chronically ill is very different to somebody's reaction when they're acutely ill and they're not used to being ill outside of that. I don't know if there's anything left to say.